Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling something huge, the Indian judiciary. We're going to use these notes to break down this massive system, the one that's responsible for justice for, over 1.4 billion people. It's a big one.
Okay, so let's just think about that for a second. How on earth do you build a justice system for that many people? I mean, where do you even start? Well, it all comes down to the foundational structure, the very skeleton that holds it all together.
And the whole thing really starts with this one simple shape, a pyramid. This is going to be our roadmap for today. Right at the very top, you've got the Supreme Court. That's the final say on everything. And then, cascading all the way down, you have every other court in the country, from the big state-level high courts right down to the local courts.
Right, so that word unified is really the key here. It's a unified system. But what does that actually mean in practice? And believe me, it makes India's system very, very different from others you might know.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Take a place like the US, for example. They have two separate court systems running in parallel, one for federal laws, one for state laws. Two pyramids. But in India? Nope, it's just one, a single integrated pyramid. This is huge because it means there's one consistent legal standard for the entire country. And any case, any case, whether it's about a small local rule or a massive national security issue, could, in theory, climb that one single ladder all the way to the top.
Now, this system didn't just appear out of thin air. It was built and rebuilt over a long time. You can actually trace its origins way back to the British colonial era, starting with the very first Supreme Court in Calcutta in 1773. Then things changed, right? The high courts popped up in 1861, but the version we see today, with that super powerful Supreme Court at the top, well, the blueprint for that didn't really come into focus until 1935.
All right, let's climb that pyramid. We're going straight to the top, to the apex, the Supreme Court of India. This is it, the final word, the absolute peak of judicial power in the whole country.
And when I say final word, I mean it. A decision from the Supreme Court becomes the law of the land. Every single other court has to follow it, no questions asked. But its job is so much bigger than just settling disputes. It's the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution. Think about that. It's basically the guardian of India's entire democracy. And the powers it has are just immense. It's the last stop for appeals for any kind of case you can imagine, civil or criminal. It can even do something really rare, which is review its own past decisions and say, you know what, we got that wrong. And get this, the President of India can actually ask the court for its opinion on a big legal question before making a decision. That's a huge power, kind of like getting the ultimate legal advice before you act.
Okay, let's take one step down that pyramid. We're moving to the high courts. Now, if the Supreme Court is the head of this whole system, then you can think of the high courts as the powerful shoulders, doing a lot of the heavy lifting at the state level.
So there are 25 high courts spread across India, and some of them even cover more than one state. In its own territory, the high court is the top dog. All the lower local courts in that area have to follow its rulings, period.
These high courts really have two main jobs. Yeah, sometimes a really important case can start right there. But most of the time, their biggest role is to be the main court of appeals. They're constantly reviewing what the hundreds of local courts below them have decided. You could think of them as this crucial quality control filter, making sure things are right before a case even gets a shot at reaching the Supreme Court.
And this really says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly sums up that pyramid structure. A high court might be incredibly powerful in its own state, but this one simple rule always applies. If the Supreme Court makes a different call, the Supreme Court's decision wins. It's final. That's what keeps the whole unified system working.
So this all leads to a really big question, maybe the biggest one. Who gets to pick the judges? Who appoints the people with all this power? And this isn't just some boring administrative detail. Oh no. This has been at the heart of a massive tug of war between the government and the judiciary itself.
For a long time now, the answer has been this really unique system called the collegium system. And what is that? Well, it's a system where the judiciary basically handles its own hiring. To put it simply, judges appoint other judges.
But the government tried to shake things up. They passed a whole constitutional amendment to create something new, called the National Judicial Appointment Commission, or NJAC. And here was the crucial difference. This new group would include the law minister. That means the elected government, the executive branch, would get a direct say in who becomes a judge.
And what happened next was incredible.
In a major showdown, the Supreme Court struck down the government's amendment. They said the NJAC was unconstitutional. Why? Because they argued letting the government in on the process threatened the independence of the judiciary. And that idea, that independence, turns out to be the most sacred principle of all.
And this whole fight leads us right to the judiciary's ultimate power, a power that goes way beyond just interpreting laws. We're talking about the power to protect the very soul of the Indian Constitution, to make sure it can't be completely changed by politicians.
This incredible power was really carved into stone because of one of the most famous court cases in all of Indian history, the Keshavanand Bharti case. It actually started as a dispute over some land, but it blew up into this epic constitutional question. Does the parliament have unlimited power to change the Constitution?
The Supreme Court's answer to that question literally changed everything. The verdict was basically this: yes, the government can amend the Constitution, but it cannot change or destroy its core, its fundamental principles. To do this, they came up with a brand new idea, a new doctrine called the basic structure.
So what is this basic structure? Well, it's not a list written down anywhere. It's a set of core principles that the court says are the absolute bedrock of the nation. Things like democracy, secularism, the rule of law, and yes, connecting right back to that appointments fight, an independent judiciary. The court basically built a constitutional firewall around these ideas, protecting them forever from whatever any future government might want to do.
Which leaves us with one last and pretty profound thought. In a system like this, where the judiciary is the final shield protecting the Constitution from the very people who make the laws, that's a staggering amount of responsibility to put on just a handful of judges. They aren't just guardians of the law, they become the guardians of the nation's most fundamental values. And that, of course, leads to the age-old question, who guards